I am Professor Chris Emdin. I work at Teachers College at Columbia University. My work with hip hop and education revolve around a number of projects. One of the most visible of them is Science Genius. Science Genius is an initiative to get young people who are in New York City public schools to engage in hip hop and science. I write about hip hop and education. I teach teachers how to use hip hop in education, and I'm also creator of the Hip Hop Ed social media movement, which is a conversation on Twitter every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. where people from all around the world have conversations about the intersections of hip hop and education. Hip hop is important to bring into schools and the process of schooling because it is the culture of young people. For as long as we can remember people like John Dewey, amazing, brilliant people like Lori Latson Billings, even Vygotsky to a certain extent. All these folks who are considered to be the icons in the world of education, who have led us to think about education differently, have advocated for a student-centered, culture-focused curriculum. The culture of this new generation is hip-hop. Hip-hop is the cultural artifact and art form that has been transplanted from the Bronx, New York City to all over the planet. It has captured the minds, thoughts, ideas of a whole new generation of people. If we are truly to engage in culturally relevant, critically engaging, and student-centered, student-focused pedagogies, then we have to focus on hip-hop. Spoken word is hip-hop. You know, hip-hop to a beat is a verse, it's a poem. I think the work to take or extract spoken word from hip-hop is something that those who are beyond hip-hop and hip-hop culture have done to be able to sort of tear us away from each other. But at its core, spoken word is hip-hop and hip-hop is spoken word. You know, whenever you think about hip-hop and talk about hip-hop, historically or even in a contemporary sense, there are a few things that have always been present. And one of those things has always been the event. Hip-hop has always revolved around the event. It's not to say that what happens every day doesn't matter, but our culture always celebrates this coming together. And so when you have a hip-hop battle or you have a poetry slam, all you're doing is carrying on the tradition of the event within the culture. And competition has always been a part of what we do. It's the way that you get your skills sharpened. It's the way that you challenge yourself to move to a different level. And it's also a way of celebration. You know, we compete not to tear each other down. We compete to be able to build each other up. As a culture, we don't necessarily have to engage in the teaching and learning experience in a sort of Anglo-centric and centered way. That way necessitates there being a teacher giving information to a learner. The way that learning happens within hip-hop communities more broadly is that information is exchanged. That's why I talk about the battle and the slam. And a battle and the slam, that's a learning experience, right? Everybody who's performing is performing to showcase what they have. The person who's listening and who's competing with is soaking in the information from the person who's performing. So we are exchanging in this dialogue in that moment. The exchange is the teaching and learning experience. Dialogue in itself is pedagogy. Like, dialogue is teaching and learning. And that's the way it's always been. So whether it's the barbershop, you know, I talk about the Pentecostal pedagogy, like teaching and learning as it exists in the black church, whether it's in a cipher, you know, that's what teaching and learning looks like. There's no teaching and learning if one person in that process is passive. Everybody has to be actively engaged in the exchange of information. Consistent affirmation of the performer is a piece of the learning experience because, one, it's not only an affirmation, it's also a valuing. It's also information for the performer to know that that's a point where they've said something or invoked an emotion that speaks to the audience. In itself, a constellation of pedagogical moments in a cipher or in a battle or in a slam, you know what I mean? And we have to go beyond looking at them as these isolated things that happen to do a show, but more of a bringing folks together to engage with each other. You know what I mean? Like bringing folks together to learn from each other. You know, this notion that it has to be all lovey-dovey in order for it to be a valuable experience is problematic because that runs counter to everything we know about the history of slam, battle, as a piece of our culture. And if we redefine what competition means and bring a positive energy to the notion of competition, then competition can be something that's edifying. In the telling of your story, you're able to give voice to your experience. And sometimes in the telling of a story, you're displaying or showcasing your core identity. Like, we all enter into social spaces oftentimes exhibiting our identity of what we're supposed to be like in this space, which is our role identity, R-O-L-E identity. And as we play out roles, we oftentimes, the more we play out a role, the further away we go from who we authentically are. And so when you give young people or anybody the opportunity to tell a story that speaks to who they authentically are, you tap into their core. And if your core is tapped into, then you're able to allow your true identity to become expressed and shared with the public.
2, 3, break!